So if I were to give advice to someone who was newly hired on as a director of talent acquisition or head of talent acquisition, I think I would recommend that you listen far more than you speak for your first 30, 60, 90 days.
The first 100 days, you usually break it into segments. First 30 days is all about listening. It's about understanding the heartbeat of the organization. It's about going and speaking to the relevant stakeholders to understand what is the strategy for the organization and how the talent acquisition function can enable that strategy.
Understand the organizational objectives, understand the status quo or the current status of the talent acquisition team, design what the future looks like once you understand what the organizational goals are, and then start to build in the infrastructure around it in terms of the artificial intelligence, the technology, the people you require to achieve those goals.
In my opinion, the most important thing, if you're starting any journey into the unknown, is you get a map. So best thing the VP of Talent could do is build a map of the organization. Now, beyond the org chart, we're looking at the skills, descriptive statistics, the career trajectories that brought people to where they are today. And you do the same thing then for the talent market, is get a real understanding of who your competitors are, not just in business, but for talent. Who's out there, what skills are available, what job titles are emerging, and you compare the two.
You've got this honeymoon period when you first start, right? So how do you make the best of that time period? And you are coming into an organization, almost call it with a child's eyes, and you're seeing things that you might get used to very, very quickly. And you've got this window of opportunity. So how is it that you can come in and quickly assess what the strengths and capability gaps and the changes that you want to make, and craft your set of recommendations and your roadmap through in a way that it will pave the way for what your future success, so that you're not trapped in, here's how we've always done it.
I think before you start presenting all your great ideas, you have to really listen, get to know your people, especially your team, understanding what's important to them, what's not important, and ask everyone that question. What would make me a great hire in a year if you were to look back at what I've done?
The next 30 days then is about looking at all the information you've gathered and analyzing it. You've taken the requirements, then analyze that data. Start making some determinations of what could change, what could we look at, where could we look for efficiencies. So it's about the thinking part of the process.
One thing we've learned is that every organization is different, and they measure things differently. And for VP Talent in the first 100 days, one of the biggest risks you can face is not having the data that you need, or having inaccurate or the wrong data. Bring together all the data that you do have, make sense of it, understand how it fits in, and then see what you need but you don't have yet, and find a way to get access to that data.
We're at a stage now where talent is changing. How we engage with talent is changing. How we talk to talent is changing. How we find the talent, how we scale the talent is changing. So what happened in the past, what got you there in the past, is not necessarily going to get you there in the future. So you can't just implement what you did previously and expect the same results in the future. So what I would say to any VP is just stop and assess the friction within your hiring process. Understand, have you got the people, the technology, and the artificial intelligence all set up for the new world of talent acquisition, that you're not making, that you're not just trusting what you did previously is going to get you the same results in the future.
I came from a large multinational, very progressive company earlier in my career. I looked at how they interviewed, how they hired people. Really, basically, their process was pretty flawless, I would say, in terms of how it worked for the company. Very clear, everyone knew their role, managers knew how to interview correctly, very well trained, knew how to look at CVs. So everything was kind of like, it was like a factory in terms of the line. Everyone knew their role clearly, it was clearly articulated, lots of really great supporting documentation, and it worked really well. So I said, look, this is brilliant. So I joined a new organization. I said, okay, I'm just going to bring everything from here and drag it in here. So drag and drop, copy and paste. Not successful. not successful at all, because I joined the company and, saying I came from this company, let's do it this way, ignoring what had gone on before for that new organization. I hadn't been there in the trenches with them when, they were trying to establish a new process, when they were under pressure, and the practices that they put into play.
There's a lot of pressure, internal pressure, to perform, to make a big splash, to prove that you're worthy of this role. And you may be tempted to jump on the first problem that someone throws out to you that needs to be solved. Again, I would encourage patience and talking to a lot of people and understanding what is your boss's number one priority? What is your CEO's number one priority? And do those match up? What does your boss's boss really want to happen? And take that all into consideration, and maybe with what you see, that's not the most important thing you should do first.
I would say the final 30, 40 days is really then starting to introduce some of those thoughts, introduce like, this has worked well, maybe we could try something slightly different here, complement what we have. Don't try and boil the ocean, don't try and do too much too soon. I learned that the difficult way in the past from myself and trying to change things too quickly. So it's, putting that last 30 days, starting to come with some recommendations and then kind of taking from there. So I would advise to split it into those 3 segments.
There is the tendency to want to get in and get your hands dirty and just get something done. All right, we've got this backlog of, 100 recs, and I know I can make a difference in here. And the tendency to dive into the weeds right then and there. But really, I think as a leader of the capability that you're bringing into the organization, it's about creating that path and that roadmap for everyone else to fall into really the vision that you have for the organization, and making sure that is absolutely aligned with your key stakeholders.
When you're trying to implement change, you really have to understand what change will work for that company, and how it will fit into their existing processes and culture.
I would recommend over-communicating. Make sure you've listened to everyone, and everyone, or the majority of people had the opportunity to speak their mind and share their ideas. And then have clear reasoning and logic, the choice you've decided to go forward with. And over-communicate, let people know beforehand why you're making the change. And even if they're upset or they don't agree with the change, they will respect you more, maybe not immediately, but in the long term, for having been honest and upfront about them. And even more importantly, 2 months down the road, if that change was the wrong choice, go back and admit that you were wrong. Have the courage to say, you know what? I made a mistake. Here's why I chose it, and now we're going to go this direction because of feedback I've got.